Hello, I'm Gwen Eiffel, and welcome to the Washington Week Webcast Extra. I'm joined around the table by Carrie Johnson of NPR, Jeff Zeleny of ABC News, and Yochi Dreazen of Foreign Policy Magazine. Late today, the Associated Press reported Texas Governor Rick Perry has been indicted for abuse of power. Is that as serious as it sounds, Jeff?
Well, it is serious because, Rick Perry is on the verge of leaving office. He has been in office, of course, since January 2001, when George W. Bush came here to Washington. But he is on the verge of leaving office, but this is going to stick with him. He was indicted under a 1917 Texas law that has not been really used since then. And it centers around a veto threat that Governor Perry made to take money out of a local public integrity unit of a district attorney's office. So we're still learning specific details of this, but the grand jury, which has been meeting in Austin for several months, decided to hand up this indictment, and it is very serious. It's a felony charges. One of the counts faces up to 99 or carries up to 99 years in prison, but I'm told by the Texas officials we've spoken to just since this came out that we should keep in mind that this is an Austin grand jury. It's a deeply divided state in Texas, of course. He's a Republican governor, but regardless of how this turns out, his office is
Austin
saying
grand jury, for people who don't know what that means,
liberal,
it's very
Austin,
liberal,
Texas, right.
Democratic.
Yeah, right. But his office is saying that the veto was made properly under state law. They've done nothing wrong here. But regardless of how this plays out, he is in the middle of trying to rehabilitate himself.
Well, and
he is trying to
run for
president in 2016. Believe it or not, for people who aren't paying attention, he was in Iowa this week. He is supposed to go to New Hampshire on Thursday, this coming week. So we'll see what this does for him. But look, he's not the only governor who is facing problems here. The Republican field or several of them have a bit of an asterisk after their names.
Let's stay with this old subject of government potential malfeasance and talk about a story you wrote for Broadcast on NPR, which is about the government watchdogs and how even government watchdogs, in this case inspectors general, are having trouble getting the government to be transparent.
Yeah, Gwen, almost nobody pays attention to these inspectors general. They're appointed by the president in most cases, and they're supposed to uncover fraud and waste and abuse.
And most agencies have one, right?
Almost every big agency has one. In fact, what happened this week is 47 of them sent a letter to Congress saying they were getting strong-armed and trying to get information from many of their agencies. And without information, without documents, access to electronic databases, they can't figure out where money is going, who's getting government contracts, whether government officials are doing what they say they're doing. And so this is a very serious threat, they say, to their independence, their ability to carry out their work. They're enlisting Congress to do something about it. And believe it or not, in Washington, where Congress is not doing much of anything, members of Congress from both sides of the aisle came together to knock on the door of the White House and essentially said, listen, these guys have a job, you appointed them to do this job, and you need to give them the information they require in order to police the government.
Back in my beat reporting days covering federal agencies, I have to say I loved inspectors general reports because they always had information backed up by data that you couldn't get with the best Freedom of Information Act request.
Yeah, they have unusual access to government employees so long as they continue to be members of the federal workforce, and they're able to demand fairly sensitive information. The reason they decided to complain now is that they're getting slow-rolled on things like EPA regulations, and in the case of the Justice Department, the big investigation of the gun-running scandal along the southwest border, the Justice Department did not want to turn over grand jury material.
Welcome to the journalist's world, exactly.
Yeah, really.
Slow-rolled. Yochi, I wanted you to pick up on something you touched on in the broadcast. This was, as we said, kind of a good news week, as good news as it can possibly get in Iraq and the Middle East. But it sounds like there's some really bad news in the offing if this group, the Islamic State group, as we're calling it now, or ISIL or ISIS, depending on where you are, if they are allowed to continue to flourish. Do you foresee kind of a heads-on battle now between Al Qaeda, which we have been all trained to suspect, and ISIS, which we're just learning about?
It's a great question. And part of this briefing that a bunch of us were given yesterday by the U.S. intelligence community was this exact issue, that there is a split. And in some cases, it's a cut off your nose to spite your face for the terrorists. So thank God for all of us. We benefit from it. Mm-hmm. But some of the Al Qaeda affiliates, unfortunately, are very skilled at building bombs capable of being brought into airplanes, plastic explosives, liquid explosives. those same groups have offered their expertise to ISIS, which would be terrifying because ISIS has the money, they have the territory. ISIS has said, no, we don't want to talk to you because you're affiliated with Al Qaeda. So there's a very, very deep split. In a weird way, it makes us safer until that split is papered over. But for the moment, that split is violent. I mean, these are people who are literally killing themselves in Iraq, killing each other in Syria. So it's both a doctrinal, it's a philosophical, and it's a violent, actual, literal fight.
And a violent, actual, literal fight, which could come home to roost here.
Right. If at some point that fight stops and Al Qaeda is able to give this weapons-making skill and technology to ISIS, then you have this terrible combination of a well-funded group that knows how to now build very sophisticated bombs that wants desperately to hit the United States.
And a common enemy.
And a common enemy.
Oh, boy. So I thought I'd end up on an up note.
And happy weekend to all of you.
Happy weekend to all of you. And thank you all for watching. While you're online, check out my take this week on why optics matter in times of crisis. And we'll see you next time on the Washington Week Webcast Extra.